Hello everyone and welcome back to Hit the Apex. I'm Charlie and today we have another video. This time we will be reviewing the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix. Before we get going, make sure to like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new round here. Dugout Daily the football channel, Hit the Apex the F1 channel and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. We'll get going then, starting with practice 1. Sainz heads Ferrari 1-2 in Belgium as F1 returns after the summer break. Carlos Sainz edged out Ferrari teammate Charles Leclerc to the fastest time in rain-disrupted opening practice for the Belgian Grand Prix, the first track action since F1 returned from its summer break. The Spaniard clocked a 1 minute 46.538 second lap on the softs to finish 0.069 seconds clear of Leclerc, who will start towards the back of the grid after Ferrari made engine component changes that exceed his allocation. Championship leader Max Verstappen was third quickest with a Mercedes at George Russell fourth and Aston Martin's Lance Stroll fifth. Intermediates were the tyre of choice when the session got going for installation laps, with persistent light rain peppering Spa throughout the morning, but conditions improved quickly to the point that slicks were soon bolted on. Verstappen, who will also start towards the back of the grid after Red Bull fitted a suit of new engine components to trigger engine penalties, was the early pace setter, but he usurped by the Ferrari duo. But with 20 minutes to go, the session was red flagged after Kevin Magnussen was told to stop his Haas on track on the hill down to Eau Rouge and Raidillon. Haas boss Gunther Steiner suggested it was a high voltage issue. While the session got going again, an incoming rain shower meant no one else could improve. Alex Albon was sick for header Daniel Ricciardo, who will leave McLaren at the end of the season after mutually agreeing with his team to end his contract early. AlphaTauri's Yuki Tsunoda was 8th, with Liam Lawson borrowing the second car for FP1 in place of Pierre Gasly for his first race weekend running, as part of the rules that dictate that all teams must run young drivers for at least 2 practice sessions in 19. Lewis Hamilton was 9th ahead of Sergio Perez, with Nicholas Latifi in the second, Williams 11th. Alfa Romeo's Guan Yu Zhou asked for a new helmet after it was lifting up a lot on the straight. He ended up 12th with his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who has engine penalties, failing to set a time in 20th. Lando Norris, who joined the group of drivers with engine penalties, was 13th ahead of world champions Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel. Esteban Ocon, who also has penalties for engine component changes, spent much of the session in the garage with an underscores problem, with Magnussen and Mick Schumacher, who has a grid penalty for a new control electronics and gearbox, 17th and 18th respectively. Next up then we go to practice 2. Dominant Verstappen comfortably clear of Leclerc in second Spa practice session. Max Verstappen was the fastest man in Belgium on Friday afternoon as the Red Bull driver produced a stunning performance to top the timesheets of the second practice session at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps ahead of championship rival Charles Leclerc. On a chilly afternoon at Spa-Francorchamps, the drivers went out for their early runs, with Verstappen leading the way on the medium tyre with a time of 1 minute 46.85 seconds ahead FP1 timesheet topper Carlos Sainz and his Ferrari teammate Leclerc. Before the rain could hamper their running, the drivers made their way out onto the track with brand new sets of softs for the customary Friday afternoon qualifying runs, and it was Sainz who set the initial pace before his time was beaten by Verstappen, who went 1.1 seconds faster than the Spaniard. Leclerc then crossed the line and went up into second, the only driver to be within a second of Verstappen's time. Sainz slid further down the order to fifth, thanks to the impressive performances of Lando Norris and Lance Stroll, who went third and fourth respectively. It was a quiet afternoon for Mercedes, with Lewis Hamilton the sixth fastest driver in the session, 2 spots ahead of teammate George Russell, who was heard earlier complaining about tyre temperature issues, in eighth. The Alpine of Fernando Alonso found himself in a Mercedes sandwich up in seventh, with the soon-to-be departing McLaren driver Daniel Ricciardo in ninth, just over 6 tenths behind his teammate. Sergio Perez left it late to go for his flying lap and set a time good enough for 10th, ahead of impressive Williams of Alex Albon in 11th. Alfa Romeo driver Guan Yu Zhou set the 12th fastest time of the session, just ahead of the AlphaTauri pair of Yuki Tsunoda in 13th and the returning Pierre Gasly, who missed FP1 as rookie Liam Lawson took his car for a spin in P14. Sainz was frustrated midway through the session by Vettel during FP2, potentially getting in the way of a flying lap. Vettel came home in P15 ahead of Esteban Ocon, who missed most of FP1 with a mechanical issue. In 16th, Kevin Magnussen, who stopped on track in FP1 with a battery problem, returned to action in FP2, but his best time was only good enough for 17th. Another runner who missed most of the running in first practice was the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, down in 18th, ahead of Nicholas Latifi in 19th, with a Haas and Mick Schumacher in 20th. Next up then, we go to the final practice session, practice 3. Perez leads Verstappen and Sainz in final Belgian Grand Prix practice. Red Bull's Sergio Perez put in a very late flying lap to finish first in final practice over teammate Max Verstappen, while Carlos Sainz was over 7 tenths off the pace for Ferrari in P3. Spa was blanketed in clouds, but mostly untouched by rain on Saturday morning, with plenty of drama in the lead up to FP3 that included grid penalties for numerous drivers, including FP2 and FP3 leader Verstappen, plus Ferrari's Charles Leclerc and McLaren's Lando Norris, as intrigue continued to bubble regarding the futures of Oscar Piastri and Daniel Ricciardo. Perez post-checkered flag lap of 1 minute 45.047 seconds bumped penalised teammate Verstappen to P2 by 0.137 seconds and Sainz down to third by 0.777 seconds. That left McLaren's Lando Norris fourth. Fernando Alonso putting in a very late flyer to go P5 for Alpine and just a tenth behind his McLaren rival. George Russell was next on the board for Mercedes, while Charles Leclerc hit the barriers and caused a very brief red flag by spinning through the gravel at turn 12. The Monegasque driver finished 6th overall in FP3, but said after recovering his car from the gravel, "I don't think the car has damage." Post-checkered flag runs saw Sebastian Vettel and Esteban Ocon jump to 8th and 9th respectively, the former reporting a possible engine glitch in his Aston Martin. Pierre Gasly rounded off the top 10, shrugging off a previous off at Blanquimont. Outgoing McLaren driver Daniel Ricciardo was 11th, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who seemed to back out of a late flying effort, while Nicholas Latifi and Alex Albon finished 13th and 14th, respectively, for Williams. Valtteri Bottas in P15 will be joining the other drivers at the rear of the grid on Sunday, the Alfa Romeo driver finishing a 10th ahead of 16th place Aston Martin driver Lance Stroll and 17th place Haas racer Kevin Magnussen. Yuki Tsunoda was just behind Magnussen, the Japanese driver, in P18 for AlphaTauri, while Zhou finished 19th for Alfa Romeo as he anticipates a back-of-the-grid penalty. Mick Schumacher completed just 6 laps thanks to a sensor issue and also has grid penalties to contend with after finishing P20 in final practice for Haas. Light rain peppered the track at the end of final practice, and it's Perez who seems to hold the cards, having set the fastest time without any grid penalties to his name as of yet. Next up then, we go to qualifying. Verstappen fastest in qualifying, but Sainz set to start on pole after Belgian Grand Prix grid penalties. Red Bull's Max Verstappen ace qualifying for the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix, but Carlos Sainz will start on pole for Ferrari after grid penalties come into play at Spa-Francorchamps, with 7 drivers: Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, Guan Yu Zhou, Mick Schumacher and Valtteri Bottas taking grid penalties. The rest of the field were essentially facing off for the top 13 positions on the grid. As a result, Sainz's scrappy Q3 lap for P2 will see him start first ahead of Sergio Perez, while Verstappen and Leclerc will drop to 15th and 16th respectively, having qualified P1 and P4 overall. Ocon qualified 5th ahead of Fernando Alonso in P6 for Alpine, but the Frenchman will drop behind Leclerc. Lewis Hamilton took P7 ahead of Mercedes teammate George Russell, while Alex Albon made it into Q3 for the first time this season and qualified a provisional 9th. Of course, those 4 drivers will be promoted 3 places apiece, while 10th place qualifier Lando Norris will start 18th on the grid. Daniel Ricciardo missed out on the top 10 by finishing 11th for McLaren in Q2, while Pierre Gasly finished 12th for AlphaTauri. Guan Yu Zhou, Lance Stroll and Mick Schumacher were eliminated from Q2 from P13 to P15 respectively. However, penalties for others will see Ricciardo, Gasly and Stroll start within the top 10 on Sunday, and Zhou and Schumacher start on the back row. Q1 was delayed by 25 minutes, and when the session began, it was Verstappen who set the benchmark ahead of Sainz and Perez, as Sebastian Vettel was eliminated in P16 by 0.002 seconds, followed by Williams' Nicholas Latifi in P17. That pair set to be promoted into a respective P10 and P11 on the grid. Haas's Kevin Magnussen finished 18th due to a turn 8 lockup. Yuki Tsunoda up next in P19, having locked up heavily in the final chicane, and Valtteri Bottas rounding out the standings in P20. That trio will jump to P12, P13 and P14 respectively for Sunday's race. So as it happened then, in Q1, Verstappen sets the pace in one take. Grid penalties become the talk of the paddock at Spa-Francorchamps on Friday and Saturday. Those hit with back of the grid penalties for the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix are FP2 leader Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, Ocon, Zhou and Schumacher, while Bottas has 20 places worth of penalties for his component choices. Sainz and Perez would therefore have a prime chance for pole, as 2 of the 13 drivers not awaiting penalties for Sunday's Grand Prix, but they'd all have to wait as Q1 was delayed by 25 minutes for a Porsche Super Cup crash and the resulting repairs. However, it was Verstappen who proved the driver to beat in Q1, as he set the early target in 1 minute 44.581 seconds, Sainz dropping to P2 by 0.469 seconds and Perez third by 0.796 seconds, to leave Leclerc nearly a second off in P4, with Stroll, Latifi, Schumacher and both Alfa Romeos in the provisional drop zone. Mercedes struggled to warm their tyres and started Q1 with a brace of flying efforts that saw Russell go 10th and Hamilton 11th. There was still time for the whole field to improve, though neither the Red Bulls or Ferraris emerged for a second run, as Verstappen was straight on the pace in Q1. With spits of rain reported through Eau Rouge, Russell rounded out the top 5 by not 1.069 seconds, with Albon going 6th to split the Mercedes as Hamilton took P7. That left Norris 8th, Ricciardo dropping to P13 due to a track limit violation. Ocon finished just ahead of Alonso as Alpine took P9 and P10, leaving Gasly 12th. Stroll finished 14th, Schumacher 10th behind in P15, as Vettel was eliminated from Q1 by a margin of 0.002 seconds to his compatriot. Latifi and Magnussen were next on the board as they missed out on Q2, the Haas driver locking up into turn 8. Alfa Romeo driver Bottas's run of 148 Q1 progressions came to an end as he was knocked out in P20 behind Tsunoda, who locked up at the final chicane to finish P19 for AlphaTauri. So knocked out in Q1 was Vettel, Latifi, Magnussen, Tsunoda and Bottas. Despite finishing P20, Bottas will start 14th in the Grand Prix. So in Q2, Leclerc leads Red Bulls as Albon makes it through. Verstappen came out swinging in Q2 with a time of 1 minute 44.723 seconds. His teammate Perez just 0.071 seconds off with his effort, while Sainz was another 6 tenths behind in P3, and teammate Leclerc was sixth fastest, having reported his car to be jumping like crazy in the apex of slow corners. Ricciardo sat P15 after the first runs having not set a time, joining Albon, then Joe Stroll and Schumacher in the provisional drop zone. When Ricciardo emerged, he was told by McLaren counterpart Norris, Alpine following suit with Ocon towing Alonso down the Kemmel Straight. Meanwhile, Red Bull decide to forego another run. Leclerc eventually jumped to P1 with a time of 1 minute 44.551 seconds, leaving Verstappen second by 0.172 seconds and Perez 0.243 seconds off in P3. Sainz ended up fourth in Q2 with 0.867 seconds off the pace, having also decided against another run, while Hamilton took fifth and Russell sixth. Ocon finished eighth and told Alonso to ninth on his second run, while McLaren echoed Alpine's teamwork with ninth place Norris towing Ricciardo, but the Australian could only finish 11th, missing out on Q3 by a tenth of a second. It was Williams' Alex Albon who finished 10th in Q2, making it to the top 10 shootout for the first time this season and guaranteeing at least P6 on the grid. So knocked out in Q2 was Ricciardo, Gasly, Zhou, Stroll and Schumacher. Albon ensured at least P6 by making it into Q3. So in Q3, Verstappen puts on a show, but Sainz secures pole. Verstappen, Ocon, Norris and Leclerc were the four drivers in Q3 set to be demoted to the back of the grid. Despite that, the Dutchman went top with his first flying lap, a time of 1 minute 43.665 seconds, putting him 6 tenths ahead of Sainz in P2. What are these tyres? Came a baffled radio message from Leclerc as he emerged for the top 10 shootout. Anticipating penalties, he would be towing Sainz to help the Spaniard fight for pole, but the team had erroneously stuck the monegasque on the wrong set of softs. Perez, meanwhile, had his lap for P3 chalked off for track limits, Leclerc completing his lap to take that third place despite the tyre confusion. Second runs incoming, Verstappen decided to sit the end of qualifying out as the fastest man on track, while Leclerc emerged only to tow his teammate up Radion and the chemistry. The execution might have been lacking as Sainz lost 3 tenths in the first sector alone, kicking up gravel to lose even more time in sector 2, and he didn't improve, yet neither did the top four. And while it was a qualifying win for Red Bull, Sainz would start on pole position, having taken P2 in Q3. Perez to join him on the front row, while Verstappen would drop to 15th and Leclerc 16th for Sunday's race. Although Ocon rounded out the top five, he will start 17th, while sixth place qualifier Alonso takes third on the grid. Hamilton will join Alonso on row 2, having qualified 7th ahead of Mercedes teammate Russell, with Albon beginning the race in 6th, having finished 9th on Saturday. Rounding out the top 10 in Q3, Norris will start 18th behind Ocon. Leclerc will start behind Verstappen for the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix. The key quote was, "It was okay. Happy to be starting on pole. Obviously not happy to see the gap to Max this weekend and the gap that Red Bulls has on us. We need to keep digging to see why Red Bull is so fast around this track and we are trailing them. But to start from pole is a good place to start and we will try and win from there tomorrow," said Carlos Sainz. Sainz and Perez will lead off the front row, Verstappen and Leclerc chasing the pack down from P15 and P16, with a Belgian Grand Prix beginning at 4 p.m. local time on Sunday. So we'll go to the race then. Verstappen cruises to Belgian Grand Prix victory from P14 as Perez completes Red Bull 1-2. Max Verstappen made light work of his grid penalties to win the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix from P14 on the grid in a Red Bull 1-2 backed up by Sergio Perez, while pole sitter Carlos Sainz finished P3 for Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso tangled at Le Combs on lap 1, leaving the Mercedes driver out of the race before Valtteri Bottas spun out in avoidance of Nicholas Latifi and brought out a safety car on lap 2. The restart saw Verstappen line up 8th, while Sainz led Perez. Leclerc, having had to pit for mediums with a tear off in his brake duct. Verstappen made quick work of the cars ahead, sweeping into P3 by lap 8 with only Perez and Sainz to beat. Sainz pitted from softs to mediums on lap 12 when Perez allowed Verstappen past and into the lead. The Dutchman extended his lead until lap 15 and clawed back the deficit to Sainz, taking the lead on lap 18, taking another free pit stop on lap 31 before going on to win over Perez by over 18 seconds in a dominant display with fastest lap to boot. Sainz completed the podium ahead of Mercedes' George Russell, who had previously passed Charles Leclerc, but lost out on the final podium place by just over 2 seconds. Leclerc was demoted to P6. Leclerc made a late pit stop for soft tyres in an effort to take the fastest lap, but missed out on the bonus point and only just held on to P5 ahead of Fernando Alonso. However, after being caught for speeding in the pit lane, a 5-second penalty dropped him to P6. The two-time champion was repassed by the Ferrari on the final lap, but finished ahead of teammate Esteban Ocon, who overhauled Sebastian Vettel in P8 and Pierre Gasly in P9 late in the race. Alex Albon rounded out the top 10 for Williams, fending off Lance Stroll for the final point. Lando Norris caught up to a battling Albon and Stroll by the end of the race, but the McLaren missed out and finished 12th, ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, who won a late race battle against Alfa Romeo's Guan Yu Zhou. That left Daniel Ricciardo in P15 ahead of the Haas pair, Kevin Magnussen in 16th and Mick Schumacher in 17th, while Nicholas Latifi finished 18th after taking 3 pit stops. Hamilton crashes out of incident Pat's race start at Spa. So as it happened, almost heralding the news that Spa-Francorchamps will remain on the calendar for 2023, the historic Ardennes circuit was basking in the sun on Sunday afternoon. That, of course, meant that conditions would be markedly different to the cool climates of Friday and Saturday. Qualifying saw Carlos Sainz take pole ahead of Sergio Perez, even though Max Verstappen set the fastest lap, as 8 drivers were hit with engine and gearbox-related grid penalties for the Belgian Grand Prix. Those drivers were Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, Guan Yu Zhou, Mick Schumacher and Yuki Tsunoda, who would cop a pit lane start after further power unit changes. Verstappen was therefore aiming not only to extend his championship lead of 80 points, but become the first driver to win the Belgian Grand Prix from P14 or lower since Michael Schumacher in 1995. Only Sainz, Bottas, Verstappen and Leclerc would start on softs, Tsunoda the sole hard tyre starter with the rest on mediums. Light out and Sainz reacted quickest, while Fernando Alonso jumped to second ahead of the Mercedes pair, and Perez was bumped down to 5th behind the Silver Arrows. Hamilton edged ahead of Alonso going into Le Combs, but the Alpine driver ran out of room and briefly rendered his rival airborne. The Mercedes driver was out of the race. "This guy only knows how to drive and starting first," exclaimed a furious Alonso. Hamilton was out after his lap 1 collision with Alonso. Verstappen had a flying first lap, jumping all the way to P8 on the softs, while Leclerc was up to P10 by the end of lap 1. The start of lap 2 signalled another collision and a safety car, as birthday boy Valtteri Bottas spun out in avoidance of an out-of-control Nicholas Latifi, who himself seemed to be avoiding Ocon. Behind the safety car, Sainz would line up ahead of Perez, then Russell and Alonso. With Vettel rounding out the top 5, Leclerc would have lined up to 9th behind Verstappen, but he reported smoke from his front right tyre and soon had to pit under caution. On lap 4, taking medium tyres and lining up 17th ahead of Nuno's Latifi, Ferrari's pit wall soon confirmed that a tear-off had caused Leclerc's front right brake to overheat and that he was aiming for a one-stop strategy from there on. The race restarted on lap 5 just after Sainz locked up into the final chicane while prepping for the resumption, which caused Perez to back off and lock up into La Source and Russell to slow in avoidance. That gave Alonso a run on Russell down the Kemmel Straight, but no positions had changed hands, at least in the top 5. Verstappen had jumped to 7th at the expense of Alex Albon and taken another to P6 from Daniel Ricciardo at the final chicane. Ricciardo would then relinquish P7 to Albon down the Kemmel Straight. Apart from Verstappen, the biggest gainers by the end of lap 5 were Ocon, Norris and Zhou, who had made up 5 places apiece at the start, Tsunoda up 6. The championship leader was far and away the fastest on track, prying places off Vettel on lap 6 at the final chicane, then Alonso with DRS on lap 7. Sainz, holding a 2-second lead over Perez, was told to switch to plan B. Gasly didn't enjoy the ideal start in his chase for the points. By lap 8, Verstappen had made his way into the podium places with a DRS pass on Russell well before Leclerc, and had just 2.5 seconds between him and the leader. Leclerc, meanwhile, was 14th by the start of lap 9, having made it past the AlphaTauris in a show of Ferrari's pace, overhauling the Alfa Romeo of Show and the Haas of Kevin Magnussen soon after. Albon and Gasly chose to pit to hards on lap 11, the Williams and AlphaTauri all but committing to a one-stop before Sainz stopped for mediums at the end of that tour, emerging 6th but making his way past Ricciardo for 5th soon after. At the start of lap 12, Verstappen meanwhile lit up the airwaves by telling his team that he was losing a silly amount of time behind Perez, and the Dutchman duly swept past down the straight to take the lead into Leclerc. Pit stops for hard tyres soon came from McLaren's Ricciardo and Alpine's Ocon, but not the Red Bulls, with Russell taking mediums and Norris taking hard shortly afterwards. On lap 14, Sainz was up to 3rd, having easily passed Vettel and the stationary Mercedes of Russell. Verstappen was adamant about extending his stint. Perez had to react to Russell and pitted for mediums on lap 15, emerging perilously close to Leclerc, the pair making slight contact down the Kemmel Straight and just behind Sainz. Perez and Leclerc were side by side on lap 15, but the Mexican kept his monogas rival at bay. With a 13.8-second lead over Sainz, Verstappen entered the pits at the end of lap 15 and emerged in second, just 4.6 seconds behind the pole sitter. Leclerc reeling from his close call with Perez, Russell made it past the Ferrari driver with DRS, dropping Leclerc down to P5. As for the other Ferrari, he was being reeled in by Verstappen, and the Dutchman took the lead down the straight, having previously insensibly aborted a move around the outside of La Source on lap 19. By the end of that lap, his lead stood at over 2.5 seconds. While Verstappen freed the lead off Sainz, Ferrari opened up long negotiations with Leclerc, asking him if he would like to stop again to ensure a P5 finish. Perez had his chance to back up a Ferrari 1-2 long before Leclerc on lap 21 and duly made the pass on Sainz, leaving the Spaniard in the final podium position. While with Red Bull heading into the sunset for a 1-2 finish, Ferrari double-stacked their drivers, Sainz taking hards and Leclerc mediums on lap 26, with the former emerging 4th in chase of Russell's podium place and the latter 7th. Leclerc would soon pass Ocon for P6, prying P5 off Vettel on lap 31. Vettel held his ground in a typically competitive midfield battle, running as high as P5 mid-race. Perez reacted to the Ferraris on lap 28, taking his second stop for hards and emerging 3rd, which became 2nd when Russell pitted for mediums to hards on lap 30. That released Sainz back into the final podium spot, the Briton chasing him down, having extended his second stint. Verstappen, having extended his first soft tyre stint, came in for another set of mediums on lap 31 and emerged well in the lead. Ferrari might have begun to sense that their woes would be compounded with Russell cutting into Sainz's 5-second lead for the final podium spot. That became clear when Sainz asked if a three-stop strategy was on the cards, before being told that this would drop him behind Russell. With a margin victory of 17.841 seconds, Verstappen led a resounding Red Bull 1-2 while Sainz held on for P3. Russell just over 2 seconds back as he missed out in P4. As for Leclerc, he made a penultimate lap pit stop in the chase for fastest lap, but emerged just ahead of Alonso, who passed him. The Monegasque driver managed to hit back and salvage P5, but it turned out that he had sped in the pit lane, dropping Leclerc to P6 by the flag behind Alonso. Leclerc's woes were compounded by a 5-second penalty that dropped him to P6. Alonso shrugged off his lap one tangle with Hamilton, for which no action was taken by the stewards, as they deemed it a racing incident, to finish fifth ahead of teammate Ocon in P7. The Frenchman made two daring moves, the first a double pass on Ricciardo and Latifi through Blanchimont on lap 17, before going three wide with Gasly and Ricciardo on the Kemmel Straight on lap 36 as he blazed to P7. Vettel pried P8 off Gasly in that melee but couldn't overhaul Ocon, the pair having made similar medium-hard-medium strategies. Although Gasly and Albon followed the same strategies, they finished 9th and 10th respectively thanks to longer third stints, ending long pointless droughts for both AlphaTauri and Williams. Stroll missed out on the final point, using mediums for his first two stints before finishing the race on hards. Despite a strong start, Norris finished just over a second behind the Aston Martin driver in P12. Zhou and Tsunoda both finished the race on soft tyres and battled at the end of the race, Tsunoda winning over the Alfa Romeo driver to take P13 for AlphaTauri. Ricciardo was running in the top 10 along with Norris until the second stint, and the Australian would fall to 15th by the checkered flag. Kevin Magnussen settled for P16 after a slow lap 11 pit stop, and Mick Schumacher 17th in an uneventful first race with the latest Haas upgrades, while Nicholas Latifi endured a race to P17, having pitted 3 times. Verstappen towered above his rivals on Sunday to deliver a third straight win. The key quote was, "It was quite a hectic first lap to try and stay out of trouble," said Verstappen. So many things were happening in front of me, but once we settled in after the safety car, the car was really on rails. We picked the right places to pass people, and we could look after our tyres. That is how we made our way forward. After that, once we were in the lead, it was all about managing everything, but this whole weekend has been incredible. It's been a weekend I couldn't imagine before, but I think we want more of them, so keep working hard," said Verstappen. We'll have a look what's next then. Verstappen's second home race of the season is up next weekend on September the 2nd to the 4th at Zandvoort. The Dutchman's 93 points ahead of teammate Perez, who has leapfrogged Charles Leclerc in the driver's standings. We'll have a look at the driver's standings then, and there has been plenty of movement. Verstappen stays at the top, extends his lead of course. He has gained 26 points this weekend on 284 now. And his teammate Perez has moved up to second on 191 points. He gained 18 points this weekend at the expense of Charles Leclerc, who has dropped down to third who gained 8 points and is on 186 points in total. His teammate has moved up to fourth. Carlos Sainz gained 15 points to be on 171 points in fourth place, at the expense of George Russell, who's dropped down to fifth on 170 points. He gained 12 points this weekend. And then 6th and 7th, Hamilton and Norris didn't gain any points. Of course, Hamilton didn't finish the race. Hamilton's on 146, Norris is on 76. Ocon gained 6 points in 8th place to get to 64 points, and his teammate moved up to 9th. He gained 10 points this weekend, Fernando Alonso. He's on 51 points and moves up to 10th at the expense of Valtteri Bottas, who didn't finish the race and has dropped down to 10th. Fernando Alonso in 9th, in fact. In 11th, Kevin Magnussen, another pointless weekend for him. He's in 11th on 22 points. I'll just repeat: Alonso 51 points, Bottas 46 points, Magnussen 22 points. Vettel has climbed up 2 places. He gained 4 points and he's up 2 positions. Ricciardo had a pointless weekend. He dropped down to 13th, and Gasly also dropped to 14th from 13th, even though he gained 2 points from a grid penalty. And then Schumacher, Tsunoda, and Zhou stay where they are. All gain 0 points. Schumacher on 12 points, Tsunoda on 11 points, and Guan Yu Zhou on 5 points in 15th, 16th, and 17th, respectively. Alex Albon has moved up to 18th as he gained a point in P10. He's on 4, the same as Lance Stroll, who is now in 19th. He dropped down at the expense of Albon, and the 2 pointless drivers, one being Nico Latifi, who of course isn't a reserve driver, and Nico Hulkenberg, the reserve driver for Aston Martin, on 0 points. We'll look at the constructors, and unlike the driver's standings, there has been no movement at all. Red Bull stay at the top. They gained maximum points, 44 points this weekend. They're now on 475 points. And second place Ferrari only gained 23 points to be on 357 points. Mercedes stay in third. They gained 12 points to be on 316, and Alpine broke the 100 mark. They're on 115 points now after gaining 16 points this weekend in fourth. McLaren, Alfa Romeo, and Haas all have pointless weekends. McLaren on 95 points, Alfa Romeo on 51 points, and Haas on 34 points in 5th, 6th, and 7th, respectively. AlphaTauri gained 2 points in 8th place on 29 points. Aston Martin gained 4 points in 9th place on to 24 points. And Williams gained a point through Alex Albon to be on 4 points. So we'll move to race wins this season. Verstappen gains another, and he's on 9 race wins out of 14 this season. That's domination. Leclerc's in second on 3, and Perez and Sainz are joint third on 1 race win each. And the fastest laps this season, Verstappen also tops that chart with 4. He gained another, and he's no longer joint top. Leclerc has dropped to second on 3, with Perez, Sainz, and Hamilton joint third on 2, and Norris is in 4th on 1 race win. So we'll just repeat that. Verstappen moves from joint first to first on 4 fastest laps this season. Leclerc drops to second on 3. Perez and Sainz joint third on 2, joined by Hamilton, who is also on 2 in joint third, and Norris is on 1 in 4th place in that chart. So we will wrap it up there then, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter as well, at MCFC Hibs if you are new around here. Dugout Daily, the football channel. Hit the Apex, the F1 channel. And at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll speak to you all soon. Take care.